Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are right now. My name is Minhao Zhai, and I'm a member of the Global China Studies program here at Huaiyu Shanghai, and I'm also the host and moderator for today's event. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the talk. I am honored to introduce our distinguished speaker for today, Professor Chen Huaiyu. I got to know Professor Chen more than 10 years ago when I was still a college student at Fudan. And personally, I benefit a lot from his work and the multiple conversations with him at different stages. Professor Chen is an associate professor of religious studies at the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies at Arizona State University. He got his PhD from the Department of Religion at Princeton in 2005, and his research covers a wide range of topics, including cultural and religious links between China and Central South Asia, Buddhism and Nestorian Christianity, religions along the Silk Road, Dunhuang manuscripts, cultural and religious history of medieval China, animals in Chinese religions, Buddhist rituals and monasticism, and modern Chinese intellectual history. Professor Chen has many publications both in English and Chinese. His first book, The Revival of Buddhist Monasticism in Medieval China, focuses on the writings of the famous scholar monk Dao Xuan and his efforts to restore monasticism during the Tang Dynasty. He also published several Chinese books on scholars and intellectuals in the late 19th and early 20th century China. So today, Professor Chen will share with us his insights about the two most recent books. So congratulations to Professor Chen. So the first book is titled In the Land of Tigers and Snakes, Living with Animals in Medieval Chinese Religions. And the second, Animals and Plants in Chinese Religions and Science. I am sure the talk will deepen our understanding of how animals were treated, represented, and imagined in medieval Chinese religions. So after Professor Chen's talk, we'll open up for questions. So please feel free to post your questions anytime to the Q&A box during the talk. We will have 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A and discussion at the end. So before we get started, I also would like to thank Professor Tan Sen and my colleague Hao Zhe at the Center for Global Asia at NYU Shanghai for their work and for making the event possible. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Chen.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank Minhao and Center for Global Asia at New York University, Shanghai, for organizing this event. I'm going to talk about some key issues in my newly published book, In the Land of Tigers and Snakes, Living with Animals in Medieval Chinese Religions. My book basically deal with the human-animal relations in medieval Chinese religions. I try to bring a new perspective, especially from the animal studies perspective, looking at how Chinese religions interacted with animals, with the natural world in the medieval period. Here we have three key terms: Buddhism, animals, and medieval period. I try to introduce sort of like the dialogue between animal studies and Buddhist studies in my book. And also my book also attempts to respond or expand discussions on Lin White Jr.'s question on the religious root of modern ecological crisis. Lin White Jr. published a very important article in 1967 discussing the historical root of the modern ecological crisis. And then I also talk about my attempt to bring a discussion on animals in medieval Chinese religions, especially in the medieval period, because Buddhism played a very important role in shaping the direction of medieval Chinese history. So why Buddhist animals? In the past, the conventional scholarship focused a lot on many different aspects of Buddhism as a tradition, also as a very important community in the past. The scholars actually published a lot on many aspects of Buddhism, including like gods and deities, like Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and arahats, and also various cultic figures or local worships, whatever. And also there are a lot of books and articles on Buddhist doctrines and texts, focusing on like the philosophical issues and concepts and on Buddhist teachings or the Dharma of the Buddha. And some other books talk about like institutions and daily life and rituals, rules and regulations. Like my earlier research was about monasticism, the revival of the Buddhist institutions and regulations in medieval China, that kind of thing. And also there are a bunch of books and articles discussing the socio-economical and cultural life of Buddhism. And also another important topic in the study of Buddhism is the relations between state and the religion. And so what I'm saying is that a lot of studies actually focus on the humans. And in terms of the Buddhist cosmology, there are six realms of sentient beings. And a lot of scholars actually focus on many of these realms, like the realm of devas and asura, humans, and also hungry ghosts and hell beings. And my book will focus on the realm of animals. So here we can look at the samsara cycle, the wheel of the life and the death. So we can see that there are the six realms showing here, including like the realm of Deva, the realm of Ashura, the realm of humans, and the realm of beasts or animals, and the realm of hungry ghosts and hell beings. So anyway, and this is a famous image from Sichuan Baodingshan. Anyway, so this is a clear image of the cycle of life and death, showing the six realms, the second reign in the center. So this is the realm of animals. The realm of animals in Buddhist cosmology is quite different, quite unique compared to other realms. Of course, in both South Asia and Chinese cultures, and we see that when Buddhism came to China, some concepts were pretty new, and institutions also new, like monastic institutions were pretty new for Chinese culture. But the realm of animals was not quite different, not quite new to the indigenous Chinese culture, because in China there were also animals, but there was in indigenous Chinese culture there was no the realm of like hungry ghosts and the realm of hell, or even the realm of like Deva or Ashura. But animals are different. There was a realm of animals in China too, and so when the Buddhist ideas of realm of animals arrived in China, so there were confrontations and also interactions, and Chinese masters, Chinese Buddhists often attempt to understand Buddhist animals from the Chinese perspective, and they try to find the differences and also the similarities of Buddhist concepts of animals and Chinese concepts of animals anyway, and based on different cosmologies. So I'm talking about how the spread of Buddhism to China kind of like shaped the understanding of animals, the realm of animals in Chinese Buddhism, from early Buddhism to Chinese Buddhism. And so I take into the animal turn in the current humanities studies into account and try to understand how the spread of Buddhism had impact on the medieval Chinese society. So I was also trying to think about how the animal studies can help us understand some sort of like, environmental and ecological crises in the history. And because when we talk about the animals, and we see that in medieval Chinese society, there was a kind of like shared concern about the so-called animal question, but that was actually a crisis from the human-animal encounter or human-animal confrontation. Here, when I talk about the animals, I actually refer both non-human animals in the natural environment and also cosmic animals or imagined animals or kind of like perceived animals, the animals perceived by the medieval people. And also we can see that animals were projected by human beings as both companions and competitors for different space in both sacred and secular spaces. And of course, when humans encountered animals, they try to think about animals and perceived animals in a different contexts in both political, socio-economical, and also cultural contexts. Animals were often used as a cultural symbolism in the human life. So we come back to the environmental issue here. My book was trying to expand some discussions on the kind of issue raised by Lin White Jr. in 1967, and in his discussion, he kind of like stated that Christianity is responsible for the contemporary ecological crisis because Christianity in its Western form was the most anthropocentric religion in the world because its creation theory laid the dogmatic foundation for human dominance over nature and and animals. So I was trying to figure out if we can think about some similar issues, especially the human dominance over nature and the animals from the Buddhist perspective. If Buddhism was different or similar to Christianity in terms of the human-animal relationship, because there are a lot of discussions in the past talking about the nonviolence in principles and ethics in Buddhist tradition. But my book was trying to offer a little bit kind of like balanced and more different tradition, more different kind of perspective. So, and also there is a sort of as I discussed in my book a little bit, I saw there was some sort of like animal turn in Asian studies in a contemporary scholarship, basically, which means many Asian studies scholars turned to study animals, study the roles and implications of the human-animal relations in Asian history, in Asian culture in general. And also there are some important books on animals in early China and also in late imperial and modern China. For medieval China, of course, there are some books, especially in the literary studies, but not much in historical and religious studies. So I'm trying to think about how we can look at animals in medieval Chinese society from a socio-economic context and also political and religious context. Because medieval period was very important in terms of the environmental change and also population growth and the development of agriculture, urbanization, and also the development of South China. And from the religious perspective, we can say that the monastic network kind of like moved towards the mountains. So the religious institutions actually developed kind of very large networks across the empire, Chinese empire, like the Tang Dynasty, and both Buddhism and Taoism competed for like monastic property. We can see a lot of records in the Buddhist and Taoist hagiographies and also other historical sources. So here, when we talk about animals, when we look at the sources, we can find that there are multiple experiences while talking about human-animal relations, and we can see that medieval Chinese religious practitioners actually owned their experience from multiple sources, including like textual experience and psychological experience, and also historical experience or religious experience in general. What I'm saying is that like textual experience basically means even though some Chinese Buddhists did not encounter some animals in real life, but they learned about these animals from the reading of Buddhist texts, like lions. Lions were not indigenous to China, not a native animal in China, but monks certainly were Chinese Buddhist monks were pretty much familiar with lions from the reading of Buddhist texts. And the psychological experience basically means, while they're reading and learning about the animals in the texts, and they can feel and sense, the existence of this mighty animal. And also historical experience refer to the real experience of medieval monks or masters, Buddhists who lived with animals in the natural environment, in the wilderness, or at a household. They encountered both wild and domestic animals in their daily life. And the religious experience basically means they introduce a religious principles, morality to handle animals. So they created a set of like doctrines and rituals for converting and conquering animals in the medieval period. So here I would also introduce sort of a Buddhist experience with animals. I call it as sensing animals. Basically means how Buddhists know about animals, learn about animals, felt animals, contacted with animals, and connected with animals, or converted animals, petting with animals, and transformed animals. So there are multiple kind of like senses or six senses in general in Buddhist sense to learn about to connect with animals. Of course, before Buddhism was introduced to China, Chinese tradition already developed textual tradition in classifying or categorizing animals. Like they classified animals into four groups, like birds, beasts, worms, and fish. And Buddhist tradition actually introduced a new classification, new categorization based on its own cosmology, mostly based on the kind of like the functions of animals in the Buddhist community, especially in the Buddhist monastic community or Sangha. But certainly the Buddhist tradition of categorizing animals was based on both the textual tradition and also daily experience. Daily experience basically means like the Buddha actually taught Buddhist practitioners how to handle animals in their daily life, in their monastic community. And certainly there were both Chinese and Buddhist traditions of categorizing animals reflect a strong human dominance. Basically means they actually use animals for their political, economic, social, and cultural purposes. So, and I developed a sort of 5C kind of a 5C model for understanding the human-animal relations in medieval Chinese religious life, connections, confrontations, conflicts, and compromises and competitions. Basically, we can use this 5C model also to understand many different relationships centered on the study of animals in medieval China, including the relationship between animals and the state, animals and the religions, and also the relationship among different religious traditions or among three teachings, organized religions, whatever, and also including like local cult. All these relationships are very important for understanding the roles and functions of animals in medieval Chinese society. Basically, we can see that in the medieval period, animals and humans, with the growth of human population and also the expansion of the human agricultural activities, there were escalating conflicts often happened between animals and the humans, and the state power attempt to understand what animals meant to its political, economic, and cultural interests, and how it could benefit from objectifying animals. Buddhist and Taoist clerks also try to objectify animals for their own interest, so they can engage with a society through both the spiritual arguments and also offering alternative approaches for dealing with so-called animal question. So they handle animals different from the state power. So here we can see that in medieval Chinese society, there was a shared discourse on the human-animal conflicts. For example, in terms of the term, the sources from like the official histories and also religious accounts often mentioned the so-called tiger violence or tiger disaster or snake disaster. What I'm saying is that this term appeared in various genres of medieval Chinese sources, which means that it was sort of like shared discourse, even though this discourse probably was developed in the non-religious context, but religious texts accepted this term and use this term often in their accounts. So different agents here, like the state, the teachings, actually developed different approaches, sometimes very similar approaches to handle so-called the tiger violence, kind of like a human-animal conflicts. So, but this term reflects sort of like a strong anthropocentric perspective, because it regarded the tiger as a problem, as an issue here. Here you can see a map showing that in medieval sources that the human-tiger conflicts were recorded were reported almost everywhere across the Chinese Empire, from south to north, from west to the east. Many regions, there were cases reported. The conflicts between the encounters and confrontations between humans and tigers across China. This is very different from today. Nowadays, most places we can't find tigers at all. So, some scholars already discussed how the government or how the state power handled the human-tiger conflict. For example, Professor Ikeda actually noted that in legal codes from the Han to Tang period, the local government often rewarded, kind of like rewarded local people for trapping and killing tigers, because the local government has sort of like responsibility for pacifying the kind of a conflict and extended the state power control over the local land. But many different teachings and or religions actually develop different approaches. And I think they share a similar perspective, which is they all these kind of like different teachings and religions like Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, or regarded non-human animals as unruly others. They objectify the animals as kind of like unruly others. So they try to civilize the non-human animals like tigers, or they try to make these unruly beasts as ruled objects under control, that kind of thing. For Confucianism, it developed sort of like teaching and a transforming model, focusing on like 5 rights and 6 rules. 5 rights including like auspicious rights, inauspicious rights, congratulatory rights, and hosting rights, and military rights for dealing with various different kind of human relationships, and also 6 rules for controlling the powerful local officials and local powers, local families, clans. Basically, Confucianism is developed for sort of like establishing the harmonious relationships between the central government, central court, and the local community, between humans and animals, and between it's kind of like a philosophy, a social and political philosophy for establishing the orderly universe and also society anyway. So a Buddhist approach developed sort of like a controlling and transforming model under undisciplined or unruly others, not just animals, but also like demons or other forces that might disturb the Buddhist order. And the Taoist approach is also to develop certain principles and rituals to deal with like unruly spirits and beasts, so they can mobilize their power to drive, kill, control, and transform, even convert unruly others. So, and religious power, it's this kind of like approach. This approach developed in both Buddhism and Taoism, pretty much focus on controlling and conversion for demonstrating their religious power. But the principles and also the rituals developed in the religious community kind of like reflect that conflicts between humans and animals were pretty much rare. So the confrontations with animals were unavoidable for both Buddhist and Taoist practitioners if they move toward like mountains or rivers and the wilderness. and it's unavoidable for them to encounter wild animals, especially. So controlling and converting animals symbolize the power of religious agency. They can control them. They can extend the religious control over the natural world. And the state and the religions or explicitly or inexplicitly competed for civilizing and conquering the wilderness and the beasts. So there was some sort of like a competition between the state power and also the religions, just over the nature world, over the wilderness and also the beasts. In both Buddhism and Taoism, we can see some sort of like religious, I call it religious universalism. Basically means the Buddhist and Taoist power try to develop sort of like discourse that can be implied in a realm under the heaven. They always try to transform natural realm, convert them to like Dharma realm or the realm of Tao. So it's pretty much a strong kind of like anthropocentric perspective in that sense. So and this is a kind of a competition between religious power and the state power. So the tiger terror was a real threat to the local community. But Confucianism developed a discourse saying that virtuous governing and the filial piety could provide local communities the safety of being free from tiger violence. And Buddhism also developed principles and rituals for taming and converting tigers. So they can help the local community to get away from the threat of tigers. And Taoism also developed a very similar strategies dealing with so-called tiger problem. So here, as a title of my book indicated, I focus on like tigers and snakes. Because in medieval Chinese narratives, both religious and non-religious accounts, we can see that tigers and snakes were described as a major threat to human safety. They kind of imminent to religious clergy and the local community, but they have a symbolic meaning because they represented two different natural environments: the mountains and the rivers, mountains and the waters, whatever meadows. We can see a lot of representations of textual, and we can see a lot of representations of visual evidence. Also, I show you a couple of pictures here, like in Dunhuang, in Mogaoku, in cave 159. There's a painting showing that a human was pursued by a tiger. This was from the mid-Tang period. And also in a later period, there was a Buddhist kind of representation talking about so-called 8 difficulties in Buddhism. One of the difficulties was the difficulty of encountering a tiger. And another wall painting from Mogaoku in cave 74, you see Buddhist practitioner actually was surrounded by a pack of beasts, including like tigers, snake, and also probably wild dogs. So, and this is the cover of my book, the cover image of my book from the cave 112 in Mogaoku. So you see the tigers, snakes, and the scorpions actually disturb a Buddhist practitioner. So the threat might be real in the historical experience of Buddhist practitioners. And also, even though conventional scholarship often talk about like the Buddhist ethics of like non-violence toward other sentient beings, but certainly there was a lot of discussions like in the canonical sources. But my book was trying to kind of like figure out the gap between the canonical principles and the local approaches. I thought there were some kind of like differences between the canonical discourses and the local experience. The canonical texts certainly laid the doctrinal foundations and outlined the moral principles about how to handle animals, how to handle beasts. But the local community had their own concrete practices for dealing with unruly beasts because they have to kind of like deal with these animals in their real life. So the local experiences of confrontation with beasts might prove the canonical guidelines wrong or unpractical. So they would develop their own like rituals and discourses about their experience of encountering animals. And also they face the local community, often the local like not just non-religious community, but also the religious community. They face the challenges from the state and also other religions. If the state power or other religions can handle the animals better, then it kind of like leave the local religious community inferior to other powers. So like Buddhist community try to develop their own unique or better strategies for handling beasts, so they can attract the people to follow them. But the state and other religions like Taoism certainly had their own approaches. So I'm not going to develop all these, discuss all these details, but you can see that in Buddhist hagiographical sources, there are large records about monks actually traveled in the wilderness alone or practiced like dutta or solitude meditation in the mountains. And so they encountered like tigers, leopards, or buffaloes, and these beasts. And the tiger violence toward monks appeared kind of very often in Buddhist hagiographies. Sometimes, they even some monks even killed by the tigers, which was also mentioned in the Buddhist hagiographical sources. So, and Confucianism and Buddhism also developed some sort of like a very similar discourses in terms of like handling the human-tiger conflict. We can use one example here, talking about that in the same text, in a commentary on the classics of waters, 水经注, in the same text, but in a different places. It mentioned that Buddhist in Buddhist text, in Buddhist concept, it is said that Buddhist compassion can move the tiger and get the tiger away. So the monk actually helped the local community to overcome the difficulty of the tiger violence, whatever. And then in Confucian discourse, it's said that the filial piety of a local person also can move the tiger away. So this is kind of very similar kind of approach, but it shows kind of like Confucianism and Taoism had a sort of like face-to-face competition. Anyway, we don't go through details, but you can see a lot of discussions in my book about the Buddhist approach, how Buddhism, how medieval Chinese Buddhist hagiographical narrative actually developed various principles and approaches and rituals for taming tigers and converting tigers and making tigers as a companion to monks. So there are a lot of, and also we can see in Taoism, Taoists also developed rituals for pacifying spirits of snakes and tigers. They use a talisman. They developed a talisman for protection, so they can enter the mountain for protection, and also for practice. So there are many different talisman in Taoist rituals. for dealing with human-animal conflicts anyway. And also because the Taoists often lived in the mountains, so they have a sort of like an imminent task for particular protection against the threat of beasts. There are many different narratives actually in the Taoist texts talking about how the Taoist priests actually can command demons and also ride the tigers and tame tigers and convert tigers to companion to the Taoist. They can kind of like protect themselves against tigers, wolves, and snakes, that kind of thing. There's also Buddhism and Taoism developed very similar, almost like same, identical titles for their powerful masters. Like in Buddhism, there was a title called the Chan Master of Taming the Tiger, Fufu Chanshi. And then in Taoism, earlier, you can see that Pei Haozhong received the honorable title of the honored master of taming tigers. It's kind of very similar. And here is a picture of the Arahat of taming tigers, but from the later period. We don't have earlier images. And also there, so in my book, I discussed that Taoism still had a strong anthropocentric tradition. The medieval Taoist narratives often show that Taoists otherized animals as non-human species, and so they can teach and transform these non-human species as others. They can convert white animals to Taoism, so they are the beasts were submissive to the Taoists because the Taoists could command gods, deities, spirits, animals through ritual techniques anyway. So Taoism was not really, you can say it's friendly to environment, but on the other hand, it's also very strong anthropocentric tradition. And the Taoism often attempt to convert natural environment or wilderness to the realm of the Tao. So Tao was kind of the highest principle, certainly. And also here, just show you a couple cases that there were gaps between the canonical sources in Buddhism and the local practices. Like in the monastic code, in the Vinaya, there is some certainly guidelines for handling like the snakes in both early Vinaya, in Pali Vinaya, and also in Chinese translations and of monastic code or Chinese Vinayas and Chinese commentaries. And it said that Buddha would not kill the snake, but use his psychic power to tame the snake. But in reality, you can see that in medieval China, Buddhism and Taoism faced challenges. Should they kill or not to kill the snakes? Of course, in Taoism, it had a long history of dealing with a snake disaster or killing snakes. If we read the medieval hagiographies in both Buddhism and Taoism, we can see that both traditions actually competed for religious power over local community by killing snakes. And Buddhism actually justified the killing of snakes in the competition process with Taoism, because they often had a competition with Taoism over monastic property, or kind of like a local ritual service to the community, to the local community. So they have to figure out how to handle this kind of competition on the one hand. On the other hand, also how to use the competition, as a kind of like a strategy to attract the followers from the local community. So, and also I would say that in terms of handling the beasts, especially like the snake, the local community had a cultic practice. So they when they cannot kill the snake or big serpent, they develop some sort of like sacrifices, sacrificial ritual, try to pacify the snake. So they use a human sacrifice. But the Buddhism and Taoism, as organized religions, they developed their own strategies to kind of like pacify this kind of snake issue, and then they can attract the local community to convert to Buddhism or Taoism. So anyway, this is a tradition in Taoism for killing tigers. The famous guy Xu actually was actually was very powerful, was said to be very powerful in controlling or killing wild animals. Anyway, so in Buddhism, even though the Buddhist tradition did not explicitly talking about killing the snakes, but in some cases we can see that monks actually killed snakes, and this killing was kind of like justified in a particular context. But of course, in esoteric Buddhist tradition, we know that esoteric Buddhist masters also killed snakes. There was a kind of we found in the Buddhist biographies of eminent monks. So anyway, so there were basically there are some kind of balanced, I would say, perspectives I developed in my book for understanding the human-animal confrontations. So I try to bring the discussions on animals to the kind of like front stage, and also try to make it kind of as a new perspective to understand the medieval Chinese religious history. Okay, thank you so much.